Let's go to the next part here about managing risk for sustainable development. As we said, these are social constructs and are not ontological in the sense that they are not fundamental beings, but nonetheless, let's read further. Simon states that the reading of history persuades me that the most dangerous villains we will encounter along the way will rarely be the forces of nature. Although there are still some hazards that are mainly out of the control of intentional human activities such as earthquakes and cyclones, what we do ourselves on this earth is determining our future to a much greater degree than ever before in human history. So let's say cyclones are naturally occurring, but our activities are changing their frequency, duration, number, intensification rates, and so on. So we're not leaving too many things to nature by itself. As I said, even earthquakes, with our fracking activities and so on, we are creating micro seismic activities, micro earthquakes, and we don't know yet whether someday it'll add up to a big earthquake and so on. This section focuses on managing risk and introduces additional key concepts such as value, hazard, vulnerability, and capacity, which are vital for managing risk and sustainability. So what we haven't said yet is about measuring risk so that you can manage it and track that you are actually reducing it. Looking here at a prop for what can happen. So here is a man standing at the edge with an umbrella looking at a cliff and facing all kinds of questions. So that's the essence of managing risks. Analyzing risk here is the practice of structuring risk scenarios and comparing them with the preferred expected scenario, making a risk analysis into the answer to three questions. So risk management then turns out to be answering these three questions. What can happen? How likely is it to happen? And if it happens, what are the consequences? So essentially you have to have a guess of what can happen and some estimate of its probability of happening, and if it happens, what are the consequences. However, it's important to note that there is uncertainty in any possible answer to all three questions, which might be better captured by what Avon refers to as the ACU risk perspective. This approach to risk captures event A and the events A and the consequences of these events C, and the associated uncertainties U. Will A occur and when, and what value will C take if it does occur? In other words, what events A that can divert us away from our preferred expected development trajectory, what consequences C they can have on what we value, and what uncertainties there are concerning all of that. So A and C. So that's what we are trying to say here. Week et al. Present an interesting approach to sustainable development in their integrated sustainability research and problem-solving framework. This framework is structured in 4 modules. 1, analyzing the current problem constellations. So we looked at the complexity of human natural system with financial crisis, terrorism, and disasters and climate change and so on. Creating and crafting sustainability visions, which we will do. Exploring less desirable future scenarios that might become reality without interventions towards sustainability. And 4, developing and testing strategies to transition from the current state to sustainable states without getting deflected toward undesirable pathways. Translating this pragmatic approach into the language of this book tells us that sustainable development requires us to analyze the current situation, so establish a baseline, define our preferred expected scenario, so map out your desired state, analyze potential deviations from our preferred expected scenario, so make risk scenarios, and 4, design and implement sets of activities that maintain our development trajectory along the preferred expected scenario, which is what we had looked at before here. Okay, so if you think about IPCC, this is essentially what it's trying to do. It has figured out how greenhouse gases have increased, what warming it has caused, how it has resulted in glacier loss, changes in climate, rainfall distribution, extreme rains, heat waves, cyclones, etc., and where we will go in the future if we continue along this path, and what are the desirable paths to avoid the damages due to climate change and global warming getting worse and worse. So we set global warming targets. There are many details involved in that. I have many podcasts on why global warming target of 2 degrees C and 1.5 degrees C are not really derived from basic science and so on. But nonetheless, this is exactly what we are trying to do. We're trying to define a future preferred state and mapping pathways to get there and mapping scenarios along the way. However, this is nothing new and can be found in the heart of Vickers' 1968 early writing on society as a complex adaptive system. The problem the regulation process, is to choose a way of behaving which will neutralize the disturbance threatening the maintenance of the expectations or the preferred system. Success means initiating behavior which will reduce the deviation between the actual course of affairs and the course which would be consonant with or at least preventing its nearer approach to the limit of unacceptable or disastrous. Okay, we'll come back to mitigation and adaptation, which is along these lines as well. Adaptation is where you are trying to adapt to what is already here and unavoidable. Mitigation is trying to avoid the unmanageable that may be lurking in the future by our own estimates. This is the essence of managing risk for sustainable development and entails a systematic analysis of what human beings value, the events that can have a negative impact on that, how vulnerable they are to impact these events, and what capacity we have of protecting them. Okay, so we'll come back and look at values and what is expressed as valuable. So we are basically setting out the bottom lines to all these things. This is only about 7 minutes, but that's okay. It leaves the risk concept and managing it for sustainable development on its own. Then we'll come back and look at value and defining valuable in the next podcast. Okay.